Hello everyone, welcome to another Roblox tutorial. Today I will be showing you how to script a axe tool in Roblox so that you'll be able to chop down trees and gather logs for your characters. In the next video I'll show you how to animate the tool so that your character will actually look like it's chopping down the tree rather than this weird axe movement whenever you click with the tool. But this video is all about scripting it, so let's get started. In the last video I showed you how to model the tool using welds so that your player can equip the tool without it scattering everywhere and without it teleporting you to a random part of the map. But for now let's put it into starter pack so that our player can spawn with this tool. And now let's go ahead and add a script inside of the tool, and I'll name it axe script. So in this axe script, I'm just going to go ahead and write out the three main methods that we're going to be calling. The first one is equipped, the second one is unequipped, and the third one is activated. And the way we call these is directly from the tool. And to reference the tool, we just have to do script.parent because the script is inside of the tool. And like I said, Roblox includes these equipped, unequipped, and activated methods. So here we can just do tool.activated and we can connect it to our activated method that we created. So now we'll do the same thing with equipped and unequipped. And let me actually show you here. It actually tells us this information. See, whenever we do tool.equipped, it says fires when the tool is equipped. And we can connect that to our equipped method that we wrote. So we do the same thing for unequipped. See, it says fires when the tool is unequipped, and we connect that to our unequipped method. And now let's go ahead and show you the same thing for activated. See, it says fires when the player clicks while the tool is equipped. So now just to make sure these are working and to show you that they are working, I'm just going to add some print statements here on our methods just to show you that these methods are being called whenever we equipped, unequipped, and activate our tool. And see, now you see it's printing out whenever I equip the tool, it says equipped, whenever I put away the tool, it says unequipped, and now that I'm clicking on the tool, it says activated. So now we want to actually get started scripting our axe. And we're going to use this activated function because we want to be able to tell when the user is holding the tool and clicks, which we'll be using as like they're swinging the axe. And so because we're going to be using it as chopping down a tree, we want to be able to tell when an axe is touching the tree part. But we only want to do this when the user is swinging the axe. So I'm actually going to create a variable called activated that we can toggle from this activated function. So when the user clicks with the tool, we can set this activated variable to true. We can do some stuff, maybe play an animation, and then when it's over, we'll set the activated variable back to false, letting us know that this swing the axe event is over. So in the next video, I'll show you how to animate the tool, but just for this video's sake, I'll show you something called tool grips, which is how we achieve this tool movement. Whenever we click with the tool in our hand, it will move up and down. So I'll go ahead and just define a table called grips in our script, which we'll use to store the C frames of our grips, which are just the coordinate frames, which is something that just basically stores a position and a rotation. So for the up grip, we'll just go ahead and set this to the current grip of the tool, which is this like upright position. And for the down grip, we'll set it to the current tool grip, but we'll modify it by 45 degrees, which is just rotating it slightly. So like I said, in the next video, I'll show you how to animate the tool, but in this one, we're just going to use these tool grips. So to do that, all we have to do is set the current tool grip to grip.down whenever we click with the tool, so whenever it's activated, and then wait a little bit and set it back to grip.up. So again, the main function of our tool is to chop down a tree. So to do that, we want to detect when this axe blade part touches a tree. So to be able to detect this, I'm just going to go ahead and rename the blade part of the axe blade. So back in our axe script, I can reference this blade part. And now before I call the touched event on the blade, I'm just going to go ahead and write our chop method, which is what we'll call whenever this blade part touches another part. And this chop method will take in a parameter of part, which is automatically sent from the touched event that Roblox provides us. And I'll just put it down here, blade.touched. And again, this is an event provided to us by Roblox. You see it fires when a part touches a nearby part as a result of physical movement. And we could just use this to detect when the blade touches another part, like the tree, for instance. And we'll just connect this to our chop method that we wrote. So now whenever a part touches this blade part of our tool, it will call the chop method and pass in the part that the blade is touching. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to use this activated variable to keep track of when the user is actually clicking with the tool. So that way this code only triggers whenever the user is clicking with the tool and the blade is touching a part. And just to show you how it works, I'm going to print the part that the blade is touching. And now whenever the blade touches the tree, you can see that it's printing out trunk because this touched is connecting to our chop method and it's printing out the part. So now that we have our chop function and it passes in the part that our blade touches, I want to make sure that the blade is actually touching a part that belongs to one of our trees. So what I like to use is something called tags. We can click on the model of our tree and we can add a tag, and I'll add a tag called tree. So that way we can check if the parent of our part has this tree tag. Otherwise we don't want to chop down a wall or a house or a car or something. So back in our axe script, I'm just going to go ahead and add these checks to our if condition. So if the part has a parent and its parent has this tag tree, then we'll go ahead and continue with our code. Otherwise we just ignore it because it's not part of a tree. And so now we want to actually do something whenever we call this chop method. And what we're going to do is we're going to add logs to the player's inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and create a script called Leaderstats, and this is where we're going to store the user's logs. And now inside the Leaderstats script, I'll define the folder that needs to be created for each player. If you've ever seen a leaderboard in a game, this is how this works. So we can do game.players.playerAdded, and we can connect to this player added event that happens when a player joins the server. And we can create a folder and name it Leaderstats. And we want to make sure that this folder is inserted into the player. And then we can create an integer value and we'll name it logs. And this is what we can use to keep track of how many logs the player is collecting from chopping trees. And it will display automatically for us in the in-game leaderboard UI. And now we need a way to connect our tool chop method to these leader stats because we don't want to increment the leader stats from our tool. That doesn't really make sense. And the best way we can do this is through bindable events. We can trigger an event from our tool chop method and we can handle that event through another script where we can increment these leader stats. So to do that, I'm going to add a folder in server storage called events, and I'll add our bindable event that we'll name chop event. And we're going to call this from our tool. But we need to be able to handle this event from our server. So I'll create a script in server script storage, and I'll name it chop event handle. So this chop event handle script is where we're going to actually handle this bindable event when it gets triggered from our tool. So I'll go ahead and reference this chop event, the bindable event that we just created. And so from the tool's chop method, I'll send the player who's holding the tool and the tree, so the model that the blade is touching. And I'll show you how to do this from the tool in just a second. But whenever this event triggers, we're going to go ahead and increment the player's leader stats, this log value that we created. So we'll just increment it by 1, so we can do player leader stats logs value plus equals 1. And then I'll just do some quick scripting to kind of destroy the tree because the player is chopping it down. So first I'll just remove this tag that we added on the model. So we'll do tree remove tag tree. That way if the player tries to chop it down again, it can't because that tag is removed. We'll unanchor some of the tree parts like the leaves and the trunk so that it will fall. And then we'll give it just like a second and then we'll delete it. So we'll let it fall and then we'll delete it so there's not just debris laying around. So now all we need to do is fire this chop event from our tool script. So inside of our axe script, I'll just go ahead and reference this chop event that we created. And now in our chop method, I can fire the chop event. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to pass in the player and the tree model. So first, to get the player, we need to get the character, which is just the tool's parent. Because whenever you equipped a tool, it gets put into your character's model. But like I said, we're going to pass the player to the chop event because we actually need the player to get the leader stats because the leader stats are stored inside the player. So to get the player, we can do game.players and we can use something called getPlayer from character and we can pass in the character. And that should be all we need because now we're triggering this chop event from our tool script. Whenever the player chops with their axe and the blade touches a part that belongs to a tree, it will call this chop event, which increments the player's leader stats log value and then destroys the tree model pretty much. And so that's all you really need for a functioning axe. Like I said, in the next video, I'll show you how to actually animate the axe so it actually looks like you're chopping and not just this weird kind of tool movement, which isn't that bad, but it's always nice to have animations. And that is it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, let me know in the comments. If you have any other suggestions or questions, please also put them in the comments.